welcome to our deep dive today.
Yeah.
It's going to be into the Syrian civil war.
Right.
We've got a whole stack of reports and articles here. And, the main takeaway is things are changing
Big time.
really fast.
Yeah, they are.
So you may know the basics, but this deep dive is really going to get you up to speed on this unexpected turn the conflict has taken.
Right.
And uncover...
That's what's going on.
Yeah, like what's going on?
What's the deal?
Uncover some surprising facts along the way.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I was surprised by a lot of this stuff. So.
Oh, yeah. It's a wild one for sure.
It is a wild one.
It is. What's remarkable
Yeah.
is the swiftness of the shift.
Mm.
I mean, for years, this conflict seemed locked in a stalemate. With Assad's control seemingly unshakable.
Right, like he was there to stay.
You would have, Yeah. These new events have blindsided many observers.
Well, a lot of our sources
Yeah.
pinpoint 2011 as the official start of the Syrian civil war. But to really understand what's happening now, I think we need to rewind a bit further.
Oh, yeah.
Like what?
Let's go back.
Yeah, let's go back.
Take it back.
What were the conditions in Syria
Yeah.
that made this conflict even possible in the first place?
Right.
How did we even get here
Yeah, how did we get here?
to this point?
While 2011 marks the eruption of the violence,
Yeah.
Syria's story is one of long simmering tensions. Under the Assad family.
Right.
First Hafez al-Assad and then his son Bashar al-Assad.
Right.
The country operated as a one-party state for decades.
Right.
This bred resentment, a desire for change.
Okay, so it wasn't just one single event that sparked the war.
No.
Okay.
Think of it as a powder keg. You had socioeconomic inequalities.
Right.
A brutal drought that put immense pressure on the population. And then the Arab Spring uprising sweeping across the region.
Yeah.
These factors combine to create a highly combustible environment.
Right, so there were all these things kind of bubbling under the surface.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then...
Ready to blow.
Ready to blow.
Yeah.
And those protests in Daraa were kind of inspired by the events in Tunisia and Egypt.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Sponsor
Big inspiration.
The match that lit the fuse, right?
Yeah, precisely. People took to the streets demanding political reforms, greater freedoms.
Makes sense.
But the government's response was harsh.
Yeah?
They met peaceful demonstrations with brutal force.
Yeah.
And that's when things escalated from protests to full-blown armed conflict.
Okay, so that's how the war begins. But it's not simply a straightforward fight between two sides.
No.
The sources we have describe a dizzying array of factions.
Oh, yeah.
We've got rebel groups, Kurdish forces, even ISIS entering the scene at some point. Not to mention powerful countries like Russia, Iran, the U.S., Turkey, all getting involved.
Oh, yeah.
How did this conflict...
It's a mess.
It's a mess.
It really is.
Become so complex.
Well, the Syrian civil war quickly transformed into what's often called a proxy war.
Okay.
Where external powers back different sides to advance their own interests.
Right.
And this turned Syria into a battleground for competing geopolitical agendas, making the conflict incredibly difficult to resolve.
Okay, so it's not just Syrians fighting Syrians.
No.
It's this tangled web of international players using Syria as a stage for their own power struggles.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And this has had a profound impact on the course of the war.
Okay.
For example, Russia and Iran have been steadfast allies of the Assad regime, providing crucial military and financial support.
And on the flip side, we have countries like the U.S., Turkey, and Saudi Arabia who have supported various rebel groups hoping to topple Assad. So each of these countries has its own reasons,
of course,
for getting involved.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's dive into that a little bit.
Sure.
Like, why is everyone so interested in...
Yeah, why is everyone meddling? Well, for Russia, Syria is strategically important. It gives them a foothold in the Middle East.
Right.
And a warm water port in the Mediterranean.
Right, because they've got that naval base there.
Yeah, they do in Tartus.
Okay, so that's Russia. Now, Iran's goals, I'm guessing, are a little bit different.
They're more regionally focused,
okay,
aiming to strengthen their influence and support a Shia-led government in Syria.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the U.S.
Yeah.
They've had
it's hard to say.
A more ambiguous role, right?
Very much so.
Like, they were initially calling for Assad's removal.
Yeah.
But they haven't really had, like, a clear strategy.
No, not really.
Yeah.
Kind of all over the place with that. Okay.
And we can't forget about Turkey, which has been primarily focused on containing the Kurdish forces in northern Syria.
Oh, yeah. Huge concern for them.
Okay.
They view those Kurdish groups, particularly the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, and its Syrian affiliate, the People's Protection Units, or YPG, as a threat to their national security. This has led them to launch military operations into Syria, creating friction with other players like the U.S., who supported the YPG in the fight against ISIS.
So you got all these competing interests, these alliances shifting.
It's a recipe for chaos.
It's a recipe for chaos.
Right.
Yeah, and what about the cost of all this? Because these sources aren't just talking about politics.
No.
They're talking about a devastating human toll.
It's awful.
Right.
Yeah, the human cost of this war is staggering. Hundreds of thousands have been killed.
Right.
Millions more displaced, becoming refugees in neighboring countries and beyond.
It's hard to even imagine.
It's hard to fathom. Entire cities lie in ruins, with essential infrastructure like hospitals and schools destroyed.
Yeah. One of the sources we have mentions the use of thermobaric weapons.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes called vacuum bombs.
Yeah.
By government forces. This is
awful.
Incredibly disturbing.
Yeah. And it's not just the type of weapons used,
right,
but the sheer scale of the destruction and the intentional targeting of civilians.
Yeah.
That raises serious concerns about war crimes.
Right. And there have been attempts to hold perpetrators accountable even outside of Syria.
Yes.
One example is the trial of Anwar Raslan, a former Syrian official in Germany.
Yeah, I remember that.
Right.
Yeah, that case.
Which resulted in Raslan being convicted of crimes against humanity.
Yeah.
That highlighted the principle of universal jurisdiction.
Right.
Meaning that certain crimes are so severe that they can be prosecuted anywhere in the world.
Right.
Regardless of where they occurred.
Exactly.
So that's a powerful message. That perpetrators can't simply escape justice by fleeing across borders. But even with these efforts, the overall situation in Syria before this recent upheaval seemed bleak.
It did. Yeah, for years the war just dragged on with no end in sight.
Yeah.
The humanitarian crisis deepened, and the international community seemed unable to find a way to break the deadlock.
Right, like everyone was just stuck.
Stuck in the mud.
Yeah, and then in November 2024, things took a dramatic turn.
Oh, yeah. A sudden rebel offensive in northwest Syria changed everything.
Yeah.
Caught many off guard with its speed and success.
Yeah, they managed to recapture key towns.
Right.
A strategic military base known as Base 46. And this momentum ultimately led them
all the way to Damascus.
All the way to Damascus.
Yeah.
Wow.
It culminated in the fall of the capital and Assad fleeing the country, seeking asylum in Russia.
An incredible turn of events.
Yeah, who would have thought?
So we're going to dive into the details of that offensive in just a minute. But before we do, I think it's important to highlight one more aspect of this conflict that our sources mention.
Right.
And that is the rise of a unique entity in northern Syria.
Yeah.
Called the Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria.
Okay. Or ANIS.
The ANIS, all right, often referred to as Rojava.
Right.
This region, controlled by Kurdish-led forces, emerged amidst the chaos of the war.
And what's fascinating is that they've established a system of governance based on principles of secularism, direct democracy, and gender equality.
Which is
very unique.
Very unique.
In that region.
In that region, yeah.
Yeah. They've also played a significant role in fighting against ISIS.
Right.
But their relationship with Turkey has been fraught with tension.
Right.
So their future in a post-Assad Syria is uncertain.
Yeah. So as we stand here on December 10th, 2024, Assad is gone.
He's out.
He's out.
Yeah.
But the situation is still incredibly fluid. What does all of this mean?
Yeah, what does it mean?
For the various factions within Syria.
Right.
How will international powers react?
Yeah, big question.
Will this lead to peace? Or simply a new chapter in a seemingly endless war?
Yeah, that's what we're going to have to...
That's what we got to figure out.
Find out, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So stay tuned because...
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back to discuss those questions.
For sure.
In just a minute.
All right. Before we, before we delve into the possible outcomes of Assad's fall, I think it's important to understand just how deeply intertwined this conflict is with, the interests of global powers. We touched on this earlier.
We did, yeah.
But it's worth digging a bit deeper into the motivations of these external actors.
You're right. It's like Syria became this geopolitical chessboard.
Oh, yeah.
With each move having repercussions.
Big time.
Far beyond its borders.
Exactly. And to understand the potential scenarios that might unfold, you need to grasp the game each player is engaged in.
Okay, so let's break it down one player at a time.
Okay.
We talked about Russia and Iran being key allies of the Assad regime.
Right.
Now that their ally is out of the picture, what are their options?
Well, for Russia, losing Assad is a significant blow. Their goals in Syria have always been about maintaining influence in the Middle East, projecting power on a global stage.
And they also have that naval base.
Oh, yeah.
In Tartus, right.
Yes, that warm water port on the Mediterranean is strategically crucial for Russia.
Right.
So they're not going to simply walk away from Syria, but without Assad, their leverage is diminished. They might try to install a new leader who is sympathetic to their interests, but it won't be easy.
Do you think they'd risk a direct military confrontation?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's unlikely they'd go that far, especially with the international community watching closely.
Okay.
A more probable scenario is that they increase their support for pro-Russian factions within Syria. Maybe even send in more military advisors or equipment.
So kind of a balancing act.
Yeah.
Trying to maintain a foothold.
Trying to stay in the game.
Right.
Yeah.
Without getting bogged down in a larger conflict.
Exactly. Now, Iran's position is even trickier.
Okay.
They've invested heavily in propping up Assad.
Right.
Both militarily and financially.
And their reasons for being involved in Syria were different from Russia's, right?
Very different.
Okay.
Yes, their motivations are more about regional influence. They see Syria as a critical link in a chain of Shia-majority countries.
Right.
Stretching from Iran to Lebanon, what some call the Shia Crescent.
Oh, okay.
Controlling this corridor gives them strategic depth.
Right.
Allows them to project power throughout the region.
So with Assad gone, do they cut their losses and withdraw?
It's a tough choice. On the one hand, they've lost a key ally. On the other hand, they've also built up a network of allied militias and groups within Syria.
So walking away would mean abandoning those groups.
Yeah.
And potentially losing all the influence they've built up over the years.
Exactly. That's why it's more likely that they'll try to negotiate with the new power structure in Syria while simultaneously continuing to support their proxies on the ground.
Yeah.
This could create a very volatile situation with the potential for further escalation.
Right. So we've got Russia trying to hold on to its influence and Iran playing a risky game.
Yeah, high stakes.
What about the U.S.?
Yeah, it's a good question.
What do you think their next move will be?
The U.S. has been signaling a desire to disengage from the Middle East. But they'll likely want to make sure that Syria doesn't become a safe haven for terrorist groups.
Right, and remember that incident back in 2017?
Oh, yeah.
When the U.S. launched airstrikes against a Syrian airbase after a chemical weapons attack.
Right, that demonstrated that they're willing to intervene militarily if their interests are directly threatened.
Yeah.
But their overall strategy in Syria has been inconsistent, to say the least.
So with Assad out of the picture, do you think they see an opportunity
They might.
to reshape the situation to their advantage?
But they have to tread carefully.
Right.
Increasing support to certain rebel groups or even to the Kurdish forces in the north could antagonize Turkey, which has been very clear about its opposition to Kurdish autonomy.
It seems like they're in a bit of a bind.
Yeah, they are.
Wanting to exert influence, but also wary of getting drawn into a deeper conflict.
Exactly. And speaking of Turkey, they're likely to remain a major wild card in this whole situation.
Their primary concern is the Kurdish presence in northern Syria, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes.
They see the YPG as an extension of the PKK, which they consider a terrorist organization. And with Assad out of the picture, they might feel emboldened to take more aggressive action against those Kurdish forces.
So you could have a scenario where they launch a new offensive.
Potentially.
Clashing not only with the Kurds, but potentially with other players like the U.S. Who have supported the YPG in the past.
It's definitely a possibility. And this is where things get even more complicated.
Yeah.
Because you have to factor in the AAS. The Kurdish-led autonomous region in northern Syria.
This region has been a fascinating experiment in self-governance. But their future is now very uncertain.
Yeah, they've been valuable allies to the U.S. in the fight against ISIS.
Right.
But they're also a major source of friction with Turkey.
Right.
It's a delicate balancing act for them.
What are their options at this point?
Well, they could try to negotiate some degree of autonomy within a new Syrian government. But they'll face immense pressure from both Turkey and whoever ends up in control of Damascus.
So their survival might depend on finding a way to appease both sides, which seems like an almost impossible task.
It's a very precarious position for them.
Okay, so we've got Russia trying to salvage its influence. Iran playing a high-stakes game.
Yeah.
The U.S. trying to avoid getting entangled.
Right.
And Turkey potentially making a bold move.
Yeah, it's a lot to keep track of.
It is a lot to keep track of.
And we haven't even touched on the other regional powers.
Right.
Like Saudi Arabia, which will see Assad's downfall as a blow to Iran, an opportunity to advance their own interests.
It's like a giant puzzle.
It is.
With each piece affecting the others.
Yeah. Yeah, and as we've seen, the pieces are constantly shifting, making it incredibly difficult to predict what the final picture will look like.
So amidst all these geopolitical maneuverings, what about the Syrian people? I mean, we talked about the immense human cost of this war.
Right.
The devastation, the millions displaced.
That's heartbreaking.
What happens to them now?
That's the most important question, and one we'll focus on in the next part of our deep dive.
You know, we've been diving deep into all the complexities of the Syrian civil war.
It's a lot.
Exploring the factions, the international players, all the,
The geopolitical chess game.
Yeah, the geopolitical chess game. But it's easy to get lost.
Oh, yeah.
In the big picture. And forget that at the heart of this conflict are millions of ordinary Syrians whose lives have been upended.
It's crucial to remember that behind the headlines and the political analysis and all that strategic maneuvering, there are real human beings who have endured unimaginable suffering.
Yeah, we've touched on the numbers.
Right.
But it's hard to grasp the true scale of the devastation.
It's hard to even fathom.
Hundreds of thousands killed, millions displaced.
Yeah, a whole generation scarred by war.
And it's not just the physical toll.
No.
It's the psychological trauma.
Of course.
The loss of loved ones, the shattered dreams.
Yeah, that feeling of hopelessness.
Yeah.
That permeates everything.
The sources we've been looking at, they describe a country in ruins. Cities bombed into rubble, hospitals overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Schools closed, families struggling to find food and clean water.
Right. It's a humanitarian crisis.
It is.
Some immense proportions.
And the challenge of rebuilding Syria.
I mean, where do you even begin?
Yeah, that's what I keep coming back to.
Yeah.
It's one thing to talk about political transitions and international agreements.
Yeah, right.
But how do you actually rebuild a nation that's been so utterly devastated?
It's a long and complex process.
Yeah.
And it requires a multifaceted approach, you know? The first and most crucial step is achieving a genuine and lasting peace.
But as we've discussed, that's easier said than done.
Much easier said than done.
Right.
Yeah. In a country with so many internal divisions.
Right.
And with so many external powers vying for influence.
So it's not just about silencing the guns.
No.
It's about creating the conditions for a just and equitable society.
Exactly. It's about giving all Syrians a stake in the future, regardless of their ethnicity, religion, or political affiliation.
That sounds like a monumental task.
Oh, it is.
Especially when you consider the scale of the physical destruction.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to rebuild homes, roads, schools, hospitals.
Everything.
The entire infrastructure.
The whole thing. It's a massive undertaking, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But it's not insurmountable. There are precedents for post-conflict reconstruction.
Okay.
And we can learn from past successes and failures.
So let's say, for the sake of argument, that a fragile peace is established.
Right.
What are the key priorities in rebuilding a shattered nation like Syria?
Well, restoring essential services is crucial. Electricity, water, sanitation, healthcare, education.
Okay.
These are the building blocks of a functioning society.
Yeah.
And alongside that, you need to create economic opportunities, help people rebuild their livelihoods, and provide psychological support to those traumatized by the war.
And what about the millions of refugees who fled the country?
Yeah. Their role is essential. Many refugees are eager to return home.
Right.
But they need assurances of safety, security, and a viable future.
So creating conditions that allow them to return with dignity and rebuild their lives.
Yes.
Is another crucial piece of the puzzle.
Precisely. And it's not just about physical repatriation.
Okay.
It's about reintegrating them into society, addressing their needs and concerns,
Right.
and ensuring their participation in shaping the new Syria.
It's like piecing together a shattered mosaic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Each piece, each individual, has a role to play in creating a new and hopefully more beautiful whole.
That's a powerful image.
Yeah.
And it highlights the importance of inclusivity and reconciliation in this process.
Okay.
Building a lasting peace requires healing the wounds of the past.
Right.
And forging a shared vision for the future.
But let's be realistic.
Okay.
There are bound to be challenges.
All there will be.
Setbacks, maybe even a risk of the conflict reigniting.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to address the underlying grievances.
Okay.
The inequalities, the injustices that fueled the war in the first place.
Right.
If those issues aren't dealt with, then the cycle of violence could easily repeat itself.
So vigilance dialogue, a commitment to peaceful resolution of disputes.
All essential.
Those are essential.
Even after the guns fall silent.
Even after the guns fall silent.
Even after the guns fall silent, yeah.
And the international community has a crucial role to play in supporting Syria's recovery.
Okay.
Not just with humanitarian aid,
Right.
but with long-term development assistance, investment in infrastructure, and promotion of good governance.
It sounds like a massive undertaking, a generational project.
It'll be a long road.
Yeah.
But the Syrian people deserve a chance to rebuild their lives and their nation. They have shown incredible resilience.
They have.
In the face of unimaginable suffering.
And they deserve the support of the world as they embark on this difficult but hopeful journey.
Well, that's it for our deep dives today into the Syrian civil war.
Yeah.
From its tumultuous beginnings
Great.
to the sudden fall of the Assad regime and the uncertain future that lies ahead.
A lot of uncertainty.
This conflict is a stark reminder of the human cost of war,
Absolutely.
the fragility of peace, and the importance of understanding the complex interplay of domestic and international forces
Complicated.
that shape our world.
Yeah.
It is complicated.
It is.
So this deep dive has been a roller coaster of emotions for me, I gotta say.
Yeah.
Sadness at the immense suffering.
Of course.
Anger at the injustices.
Yeah.
But also a glimmer of hope
Where is hope?
for a better future
Yeah.
for the Syrian people.
Absolutely. And that's the key takeaway, I think. Even in the darkest of times, hope endures.
Right.
The path ahead for Syria is long and arduous.
I think it'll be a long road.
But the possibility of peace, justice, and renewal remains. It's up to all of us, both inside and outside of Syria, to work towards that goal.
Well said. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.